Gulati, editor Newsex, Sri Pawan Vermaji, legal luminaries and distinguished guests and others watching this program online. First of all, I would like to be frank that this second Sri Ram Jethmalani Memorial Lecture is an important issue that is agitating the minds of the people. The disruptions in Parliament. I also feel happy to see the galaxy of legal luminaries, political commentators, Sri Venugopalji is looking very colorful, like Sri late Ram Jethmalani. Till the end, Ram Jethmalani used to be very colorful because I had personal acquaintance with him because of the political connection I had being there in that party which supported him earlier. Of course, I am no more in politics, not going to be there in future also. But this personality of Sri Ram Jethmalani, you do not need any introduction. He is a very distinguished legal luminary of this country. When we go through his arguments, his performances, his achievements, amazing that way. I'm not going to speak about his background and all because already a detailed introduction has been given, though you do not need any introduction, or at least for the newcomers to public life. I compliment Sri Mahesh Jethmalani, the distinguished son, for instituting this lecture series in the memory of his distinguished father. He was a remarkable person by all counts and standards. He lived for 95 long years, and his journey was marked by a rare demonstration of energy and passion till the end. Having become a law graduate at the age of 17, began his practice in his hometown of Sikarpur in Sindh, the age of 18 years after successfully contesting the prevailing norm of minimum age of 21 years for being a lawyer. He was dynamic and he was admired by people across the country because of his legal acumen, the way he used to put forth his point of view, and the beautiful command he had over the subject as well as the language. What made Sri Ram Jethmalani a successful lawyer was the innovation he used to impart to the process of legal inquiry, offering new interpretations and possibilities, which the judges sitting on the bench could not ignore and had to even acknowledge grudgingly at times. With every case Sri Ram Jethmalani argued, he became more and more sharper and famous. Being a successful lawyer is very demanding in one's time and energy. He had a passion for the chosen profession and sustained it for long years. As a lawyer, he opened new vistas of legal understanding in almost every major case he argued. Of these 77 years of eventful journey, Sri Jethmalani was a member of parliament for 37 years, having been in Rajya Sabha 6 times from 4 different states, and once a nominated member and twice elected to Lok Sabha. He was also a Minister for Urban Development and Law and Justice. It is very rare to wear 2 hats successfully. And only men of caliber of late Ram Jethmalani could do it. Sri Jethmalani described himself as a maverick. He was a maverick with a conscience, a maverick unchanged, unrepentant, a luminary who had witnessed the conflict of laws and seen big egos of small men. These descriptions were titles of the books he wrote. The dictionary meaning of maverick is a person who is unorthodox, independent-minded, and innovative. There is innovation in whatever he does, whatever he said. Late Sri Jethmalani was all about it, and all through his life, so was unique. He was a rebel and a radical thinker. Now let us come to the theme of the lecture. Is disruption of parliamentary proceedings an MP's privilege under a facet of parliamentary democracy? The answer is no. Simple. I cannot but appreciate the acumen of Sri Mahesh Jethmalani, a distinguished lawyer, a member of Rajya Sabha now, in posing such a question, and that too to a presiding officer. He is clever, seeking to force the chairman of Rajya Sabha to answer such a tricky question, knowing pretty well that I don't have the luxury of being ambivalent that the highly cerebral lawyers can be. Particularly so in the context of what had happened in the Rajya Sabha during the last monsoon session, which is fresh in the minds of the people. However, having accepted the proposition, I venture to answer it. In the process, I am conscious that it is for the first time that a presiding officer of any legislature would be taking a position on such a question openly. To begin with, we need to understand as to why the disruptions in our legislatures, including Parliament, have come to be a matter of serious concern. Parliament, state legislatures, we are all witnessing what is happening, and people are getting distressed, disillusioned, disappointed. Legislatures are meant to make laws for the people and the country, with the members effectively articulating the concerns and the aspirations of the people by deliberating on various issues of wider public concerns, besides ensuring the accountability of the executive to the legislature. Ensuring accountability of the executive to the legislature. That is possible when there is a debate, when there is a discussion. In essence, the legislatures are to function on behalf of the people and for the people. They are supposed to be productive, not disruptive or obstructive or destructive. They are supposed to be constructive. This warrants us to take a look at the functioning of our parliament since independence. I am trying to place the facts before the people. Rajya Sabha, after much deliberations in the Constituent Assembly on its need, there was a discussion about the need of Rajya Sabha, and relevance came into being May 1952. Its productivity is being quantified with all relevant data since 1978. During 1978-1996, the productivity of the House has been more than 100%. The average annual productivity of the House, measured in terms of effective utilization of available time, has been 100% for more than 16 of these 19 years. However, the scenario has begun to change thereafter. During the 24 years between 1997 and 2020, the productivity of the House slacked 100% or more only in 2 years, in 1998 and 2009. Not even once during the last 12 years. This is the area of concern which brings out the consequence of raising disruptions. The overall productivity of Rajya Sabha during 2004 and 14 has been about 78%. And since then it has come down to about 65%. The productivity of the last 11 sessions that I have had the honor of presiding over comes to 66.50%. 4 of these 11 sessions clocked a low productivity of 6.80%, 27.30%, 28.90%, and 29.55%. In effect, more than 2/3 of the last 11 sessions were very badly hit by disruptions. During the year 2018, Rajya Sabha has recorded the lowest ever annual productivity of 35.75%. The overall productivity of 2 sessions held in 2021 has further dipped to 63.85%. During the last monsoon session, that is 254th Rajya Sabha, the House had lost more than 70% of the scheduled time, including 77% of the valuable question hour time. Earlier, because of this pandemic, and question hour was done away with because a lot of officers has to come and there is sitting space. Questions were raised about the wisdom in cancelling question hour, and some people said cancelling question hour is murder of democracy. Yeah, question hour is allowed. Every day, 15 questions are admitted. Answers are prepared after exhaustive search for facts and getting information of government at various levels. But questions were not raised and not allowed to be answered. Questions were not allowed to be raised. Question hour is an important instrument of seeking accountability of the executive for the implementation of the government policies and programs and pinning down the executive on the lapses thereof. During the last 6 years, over 60% of the valuable question hour time has been lost due to disruptions. This state of affairs justifies the growing concern over the present persistent disruption. Not only question hour, we came out with a new idea of 0 hour. 0 hour also every day, around 20 plus 0 hour submissions were accepted, notified, members were informed, but members were not allowed to ask 0 hour or make 0 hour submission. Special mentions also, an equal number, were admitted, raised by various members of various political parties, but could not be taken up. It is in this context that the question whether disruption of parliamentary proceedings being the privilege of the members of parliament needs to be understood and answered. There is also equally a very disturbing trend of getting the legislations, laws passed in the din. It's not a happy thing. But one of the functions, as I said earlier, of the parliament is to make legislations for governing the country, for giving guidance to the executive. But when the House is not allowed to function and there is continued disruption and din, so do you give up making legislations? That means making the House dysfunctional, even on that count, crippling democracy and the system, handicapping the government of the day, which is elected, to have legislations of choice after debate and discussion. So some of the members asked me, sir, please ensure that no bill is passed without discussion and without din. I said, I totally agree with you. So I came with a solution. I said, no din and no passing of the bills in the din. Simple. You follow rules, allow discussion to take place, and then vote for or against the bill. That choice is left to you. But if you don't allow the House, and if there is a continuous din created, what you do? That is a question. In doing so, we need to understand the context and framework in which MPs are required to function and why some privileges are given to the Parliament and its members. Number one, rules of conduct. There is an elaborate scheme of rules of procedure and conduct of business in the Council of States, a code of conduct, a detailed parliament etiquette, the constitutional provisions, customs and conventions of the House, and the rulings of the chair, successively, whoever is there, which are to be complied with by the members. It's very clear. The stated objective of all these rules and guidelines is to ensure high standards of behavior of members both within and to enable smooth functioning of the House and uphold the dignity and stature of the Parliament. Certain privileges granted to the members and to Parliament are also intended to enable the purpose of Rule 230 of the members during the proceedings of the House. Rule 235 clearly stipulates that members shall interrupt members while speaking and shall maintain silence and not speaking in the council. While 243 requires that the chairman, whenever he raises, shall be heard in silence, and any member who is speaking or offering to speak shall immediately sit down, but these rules are being violated too often. The 14-point framework of the Code of Conduct recommended by the Ethics Committee of the Rajya Sabha and adopted by the House on December 15, 1999 requires that members must not do anything that brings disrepute to the Parliament and affects its credibility. Going to the well of the House, bringing placards, snatching papers from the minister, obstructing the functioning of the House by not only going to the well of the House, but also going to the extent of climbing on the table of the Secretariat, tearing the papers, throwing them on the chair, whoever was there in the chair at the time. These things were not even imagined. There used to be disturbances, disruptions, but not this way. Further, there is an elaborate 42-point parliament etiquette which the members are required to follow, which helps in upholding the dignity of the House and the members. This scheme is drawn from the rules of the House, rulings of the chairman, successive chairmen, conventions and parliamentary practices. This code requires the members not even to converse among themselves, to avoid disturbing the proceedings of the House, not to raise to speak unless called by the chair, not to repeat the arguments of the previous speaker or one's own, not to interrupt or argue with the member who is speaking, not to use offensive and unparliamentary language, and not use their right of speech for the purpose of obstructing the business of the House. So all this was agreed upon by the House. It is clear that the objectives of this scheme is also to have order in the House so that it functions effectively. This code even requires the members not to read newspapers, periodicals, etc. in the House, not to leave once the speech of the member is over and to be present. Some people have the habit of making a speech and going away. When the minister is replying, you are supposed to be present. You have participated in the debate. You asked questions. You raised issues. When the minister is replying, you are supposed to be there, unless you decide, no, we have to talk out and walk out. These norms of behavior are meant to uphold the solemnity of the proceedings of the House and enhance the dignity of the House. But what is happening is to be contrary on a regular basis. This is what is disturbing. Privileges. Is disruption a privilege of MPs? The origin and significance of certain powers, privileges and immunities of the Houses of Parliament and its members has been discussed and elaborated in length in the publications of renewed Kaur and Shagda, which we all follow. Some privileges are granted to members of Parliament and other legislatures to enable them to perform their duties without any hindrance, without any fear. These are available to members only in so far as they are necessary for the House to freely perform its function. This is a privilege. These privileges are outlined in the Constitution, in the statutes, in the rules of business, and some are based on precedents. Some of these privileges and immunities are freedom of speech in the House, immunity to a member from any court proceedings for anything said or vote given in the House by any committee thereof, immunity from any of the court proceedings in respect of publication of any report, vote or proceedings, prohibition of the courts to inquire into the proceedings, freedom from arrest of members in civil cases during the session, 40 days before its commencement and 40 days after conclusion, civil, not the criminal. Right of the House to receive information about the arrest, detention, conviction, imprisonment, and release of a member, exemption from the arrest within the premises of the House, not to be compelled to give evidence in the courts without the permission of the House, and right to communicate with the chairman during the detention of the members. Quite often I see some of the members, they argue, no sir, they have not taken permission of the speaker or the chairman, there is no need to take any permission. The chair, the House has to be informed of an arrest or a detention. These privileges were adopted from those available to the House of Commons of the United Kingdom. Article 105 of the Constitution, when conferring the right to free speech and immunity from court proceedings, required that privileges may further be defined by an Act of Parliament, which is still to be done. The issue of codification of the privileges were examined at length, including by the Committee of Privileges of Lok Sabha, which in April 2008, concluded that the preponderance of opinion collected in the matter was against such codification. It was perhaps to enable the House deal with any situation arising both within and outside, as a codification of privileges may restrict the scope of penal action to be taken as warranted. The Committee of Privileges of Lok Sabha significantly noted that privileges are enabling rights of members to put across the views and voice the concern of their constituents fearlessly. These could therefore be termed as indirect rights of members of constituents, the people who elected members. It is this essence of privilege that needs to be understood properly. Thomas Erskine May, the former clerk, that means like our Secretary General of the House of Commons of the United Kingdom, and a constitutional theorist, presented the parliamentary privilege in perspective in his seminal book, Parliamentary Practices. He said, I quote, "Parliamentary privilege is the sum of certain rights enjoyed by each house collectively and by members of each house individually, without which they could not discharge their functions, which exceed these possessed by other bodies or individuals. Freedom of speech belonging to primarily to individual members of each house and exists because it has the power to punish for contempt and the power to regulate its own constitution by expelling errant members as a means to the effective discharge of the collective individual members. It is, my dear friends, brothers and sisters who are watching this program, it is the sum of the performance of the individual members of a house that constitute the performance of a law-making body. It then follows logically that the privileges of the House and its members are intended to enable performing legislature and not disruptive ones. Disruption of proceedings negate the functioning of the legislature. The privilege of freedom of speech of legislators during the proceedings is the most talked about one and often perceived negatively. I would like to stress that it is not an unfettered right and it is qualified. To further illustrate this point, the Rule 238 of Rules of Rajya Sabha stipulates that a member while speaking shall not refer to any matter which is under consideration of the judiciary, make a personal charge against a member of the other side, use offensive expressions about the conduct or proceedings of any other house, reflect on the conduct of a person in high authority unless the discussion is based on a substantive motion, reflect on any decision of the council except on a motion for rescinding it, etc. These are very clear. It's pertinent to note that the chair can direct a member if his speech is repetitive in the interest of the management of the time of the house, which further highlights the limits of freedom of speech of members. The Committee of Privileges of Rajya Sabha has rightly stressed that this privilege can only be secured. It is not abused if it is not abused by the members. Disregard of any of the rights, privileges and immunities, either of members of parliament individually or of the House in its corrective capacity amounts to a breach of privilege and is punishable with admonition, reprimand, withdrawal and suspension from the House, imprisonment and expulsion of members from the House. This House has all powers to deal with any situation and punish the errant members appropriately. Let us now deal with the disruptions and their consequence. If disruptions can be claimed as a privilege by the disrupting members, it is plain and simple that the legislature have been conceived as a deliberative and law-making body. These functions are best discharged when the legislatures function smoothly and effectively without hindrance. Persistent disruptions forcing the House to be adjourned and impending smooth function of the Parliament is clearly against the scheme envisaged under the rules of business, code of conduct for members, Parliament etiquette, and the privileges and immunities granted individually to members and collectively to the law-making bodies. Friends, disruptions resulting in forced adjournment of the House lead to derailment of the business schedule for the day. Some people ask me, sir, you are immediately adjourning the House. I don't want those vulgar things to happen and then to be seen by the people. Of course, there is a view, other view. No, they should be shown and people must have a right. I am having a rethinking on that. Depriving the other members willing to participate in the proceedings and accordingly identified delay the course of lawmaking, etc. I can tell you, as I was telling, one member came to me and told me and gave me the figure, sir, 89 to 91% of the members of Parliament, they want the House to function. They want to ask questions. They want to raise issues. They want to speak. But few members, they are obstructing and obstructing regularly. This is their complaint and they say our privileges are affected. Privileges of larger sections of the House are affected. Besides the financial implication of rendering the legislature dysfunctional through disruptions, the socio-economic impact of delayed legislation and defective legislation are quite substantial. Defective legislation. You will have effective legislation provided if there is a meaningful debate, orderly conduct. Otherwise, yes, defects do occur. Accordingly, members of Parliament are enabled in different ways to give out their best performances and certainly not empowered to disrupt the proceedings of the House. Erskine May has defined the contempt of the House, and I quote, generally speaking, any act or omission which obstructs or impedes either of the House of Parliament in the performance of its functions, or which obstructs or impedes any member or officer of such House in the discharge of his duty, or which has a tendency, directly or indirectly, to produce such results may be treated as a contempt, even though there is no precedent of offense. Some cases of disruption depriving members willing to participate in the scheduled proceeding of the House were referred to Committee of Privileges of Rajya Sabha. In its 59th report, the committee recommended step-by-step action against disruptors and recommended automatic suspension of the repeated offenders from the House for 5 consecutive sittings or remainder of the session. This means that the disruptions have serious implications and are not acceptable. Both the House of Parliament have passed resolutions. I would like to tell the people of the country and also budding legislators and present legislature. On the occasion of Golden Jubilee of Independence in 1997 and on the occasion of 60 years of the first sitting of Parliament in 2012, which inter alia required the members not to disrupt the question hour, number 1, not to enter the well of the House, number 2, to uphold and maintain the dignity and sanctity and supremacy of Parliament. It was unanimously agreed upon and a solemn assurance has been given to the people through the Parliament. But these solemn commitments are being followed more in violation, leading to widespread public concern. In conclusion, the disruptions of the proceedings is a certain negation of the spirit of the intention behind the rules of the House and the code of conduct and the parliamentary etiquette and the scheme of parliamentary privileges, all aimed in enabling effective performance of individual members and the House collectively. Given the consequences, disruption of proceedings clearly amount to contempt of the House, by the logic of which disruptions cannot be claimed as a privilege by errant members. The other aspect of the theme of this lecture is if disruption is a facet of parliamentary democracy. The dictionary meaning of the word facet is one aspect of something many-sided. MPs may have the right to protest against the perceived omissions and commissions of the government of the day, but should be done in a civil manner. You speak, you protest, you oppose, you vote against. That's why I always say, often say, let the government propose, let the opposition oppose, let the House dispose. There is no other remedy. You don't have numbers, you don't have majority support, but you want to enforce your will. How is it possible? It's not acceptable in democracy. The executive can be taken to task during the debates through effective interventions. Protesting members can either talk it out or walk out. I say talk out or walk out. Otherwise, no breakout. If there is a continuous breakout, it will be all out of democracy. That danger is there. The disruptions has emerged as a facet of our parliamentary democracy for the last 25 years. It's happening now and then. Since 1952, only 10 members of the Rajya Sabha were suspended for misconduct inside the House on 8 occasions during the first 57 years. But since 2010, 18 members were suspended in the last 11 years on. 5 occasions, including 9 on 2 occasions during the last 1 year. I am talking of the Rajya Sabha, Lok Sabha. Many more members were suspended and some members were expelled from the House for the remaining part of their membership. These suspensions do not reflect the gravity of the situation since the action is not resorted on all occasions for various reasons. People ask me, children also, they give messages to me, sir, why are not taking action on disruptors? When I was so sad and depressed, and I expressed my sorrow, children who have seen that on TV, some of them sent a message to me, are you so helpless? Why are you not taking action? Taking action is not a big issue. I will if necessary. But is it the only remedy available? We are trying to console, we are trying to educate, we are trying to urge upon the members from time to time. That's why we make appeal. On the 75th year of independence, which we are now celebrating, I urge upon all the stakeholders, including all political parties and the executive, to introspect and commit themselves to do the needful to put an end to the unsavory saga of disruptions in the legislature so as to enhance the quality and dignity of parliamentary democracies by resorting to credibility of its organs. This is my appeal to the people. From parliament, spreading to legislatures, state assemblies. From there, it's coming back here. So this is not going to have any positive effect on one of the, we say we are a vibrant parliamentary democracy. If you do not allow the House to function, that's why late President Sri Pranab Babu, he said, discuss, debate and decide, do not disrupt. That is the only way forward. And of course, as I explained to you in detail about various provisions and powers of the chair also, and what is happening to our system in the recent days. To the extent possible, I tried to be brief. I might have taken time, but I don't want a situation where you continuously have to resort to taking action. But the question I have in my mind, I am not able to get answer. If a political party decides not to allow the House to function, though they may not have strength, what is the remedy? You cannot pursue it. A lot of members come to me and tell me, sir, direction from the party. Some people come and tell me, sir, this session is not going to be washed out. Not only to me, they said it to the media also. In such a situation, what do? If they come prepared in their mind and they express their helplessness because of the party. One unfortunate aspect is parliamentary performance is not having any effect on member being renominated, member being re-elected. That's also another problem. All these aspects has to be gone through, and I hope the parliamentarians and also political parties apply their mind seriously to this important issue, which is eating to the vitals of our democracy, and come to some sort of meaningful conclusions and uphold what the parliament collectively has done it and passed a voluntary code of conduct for members. Thank you all for your patient audience. Thank you, Mahendra Malani, for organizing this wonderful series of memorial lecture in memory of the great son of this great country. Thank you very much. Namaskar. Jai Hind.
Venkaiah ji, thank you very much, sir.